tell you a few things about Colin. Colin has been someone I've known for the better part of 20 years. By that stage, he already had an incredible entrepreneurial history. I mean, this is someone, he'll correct me to the dates, but in the mid-1970s, he installed the first electronic petrol pumps in Britain. Some years, a few years only after that, he actually did the first electronic credit card transaction in Britain. And he did it with acoustic couplers, if you know what those are, which can be very painful, and all sorts of very, very early simple technology on, I think, 2,800 baud, which is a lot slower than your mobile phone, even on a really bad day, and you think you have to reset it. Since then, he's been a pioneer in electronic dealing systems, in commodities exchanges. He's traveled all over the world. One of his, I think, wonderful claims to fame is he made the Nepal Stock Exchange electronic, which is not something that you generally can say to everybody in the street when you meet them. And without further ado, Colin's going to talk to us this evening on, I think, a fascinating topic. The topic not just of success, but particularly of failure and how to deal with it. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you all to Colin Howard. Colin, please take it away.
Patrick, thank you very much. The bird rate is actually 200, not 2,800. Okay. Anyway, hello.
Hello.
If you are listening to this talk, then almost certainly you would like to consider yourself to be a potential entrepreneur. My mission is to share some of the experience that I have gathered in my lifetime, in the hope that it will inspire some, and if appropriate, discourage others. Thank you for killing the back feed. Almost certainly, your image of what it is to be an entrepreneur is a fantasy, and in many senses, that is fine. Because those of you who really have what it takes to live this unique lifestyle have to be driven by dreams. Be a natural optimist. You need the dream to get going, the optimism to keep you going. However, I believe the best service that I can give you is to talk about all the problems that you will face and how you will have to deal with them. Because the absolute reality is that most entrepreneurs do not end up cash rich, and many will fail completely. What I will seek to argue, therefore, is that result does not make you poor as a consequence. The best service I can give you is to tell you about the problems you will face and how to deal with them. Because unfortunately, most entrepreneurs don't end up a success. They don't end up with lots of money. And I would say to you that even if that happens, you mustn't regard yourselves as in any sense a failure. But to start at the very beginning, there has to be a beginning. And I would suggest that it almost does not matter what that is. To become an entrepreneur is a bit like becoming a monk or a nun. You have to take the dramatic step of leaving your old life behind. That is the life of a secure salary, a known job function, being told what to do, having your annual salary review. I must stress that I do not criticize this lifestyle. Every entrepreneur needs people to work for them, and 99% of the population are going to be fulfilling worthwhile functions within the organizations that you may be creating. So the question that only you can answer is whether you are one of the 1% that can take the dramatic step of going on your own. 2 points there. If you think you want to, then do, please, have a go. You will certainly be a more useful person in whatever else you try and do if you have tried. And the title of my talk is Celebrating Failure. So, if you do return to a salaried post, then I will congratulate you for trying, not criticize you for a return to normality. The second point is, for goodness sake, do it as soon as you can. Ideally, before you become burdened with responsibilities. You are likely to be extremely poor for a while. So have as little expense as possible. Do not, please, order a Ferrari on the first day as an entrepreneur. But many of you will be sitting there thinking, that is all very well, but what exactly can I turn my hand to? What can I do to start a business? Should it be a restaurant? Or a consultancy? A workshop fixing cars? Or designing lingerie? May I please tell you that it honestly does not matter what you do for the first 3 months, because almost certainly the tide of life will carry you somewhere else, reveal other options, entice you into other interests. The very hard thing to do is to cut the umbilical cord of dependency. Do without the safety net. Throw away the parachute. Listening to me now, that is the very first thing that will define whether you can be an entrepreneur. And I say to you now that if you cannot, then celebrate that failure. Regard it as a sensible recognition of your own desire, and work at a structured job. You are most likely to end up with more money than if you follow the other path. Nothing can prepare you for the emotions of those first few weeks alone. Sorry about the phone. You will face the envy and, I regret, the jealousy of all your friends who would love to make the same move. Meanwhile, your family will think you are mad. Why give up a good job or career for such an uncertain path? And there will be many times and days when you ask yourself that too. No longer have you got the support network of associates and colleagues around you. Now everybody is either a competitor, a supplier, or a client, and they all have their own agenda, which is not geared to giving you any slack or advantage. Is that lonely? My goodness, yes, it certainly is. Is it stressful? Yes, that too. Can you show that to anybody? Absolutely not. You are learning fast to be a brilliant actor, showing a face and confidence to the world that you do not feel inside. I tell you, however many years you do it, nothing changes there. Nothing stops the worry from troubling you in the middle of a sleepless night, alone with your thoughts and fears. So what is it exactly that you are worrying about? Here I come to the core of my message to you, because you are concerned that you will fail, that your big idea will not work, that the money to pay the bills will not come in on time. Oh yes. It would be so easy for me to encourage you with the well-known tales of the success stories. But in all truth, they are the exceptions, because starting anything new is extremely difficult, because initially you are simply not welcome. Let me please take an airline study and ask you to Google Freddie Laker when you have time. Freddie Laker. You will find that he went bankrupt trying to establish the sort of low-cost airline that we take for granted today, forced out at the time by a fiercely defensive establishment who conspired to destroy him. If you decide to take on any form of established structure, provide it with competition that perhaps threatens their existence, then that is what they are going to try to do to you. So, may I come to a point where I have a huge message for you all. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you are actually saying that you want to eat somebody else's lunch, that you are prepared to fight your way into their cozy backyard and take over their lifestyle. Behind the smiles, the presentation, the dreams, has to come a willingness to indulge in brutal warfare. And as a consequence, you may well fail the first time, and indeed the second, and perhaps the third as well. Indeed, you may never succeed. 2 points from that. First, I talk about the second and third time, whereas you might expect me to say that you give up after the first failure. Regrettably, that is impossible, because very soon, into the time that you turn your back on the security of a salary, then you will become unemployable. Never again able to accept that somebody else is going to tell you what to do. Have charge of your life. Thus, please think carefully before you even start. An entrepreneur has to be able to cope with considerable stress, maintain an external image that they will not feel internally, sustain their dreams with an optimism that may be bordering on the irresponsible. You must be prepared to exist with a degree of personal loneliness and disregard the assaults of others that are beyond all reason. If I have not defined what you personally think you actually are, then stay a valued citizen in employed status. Do not regard it as a failure, but a narrow escape. Second point, and perhaps the most important one that I would wish to draw to your attention, those failures are never actually total. Indeed, many will be as magnificent as any study of Laker Airlines will seem in a historical context. Not only will whatever you do have created another stepping stone to the future, perhaps for somebody else to follow, but you will also have created considerable economic activity in trying to deliver your dream, whilst at the same time receiving an education that no MBA program ever devised can begin to compete with. At this point, we could divert and go on to study some of the brilliant failures of entrepreneurs who have invested too early. Study those who picked up the ideas later and ask ourselves why it was that they succeeded when such earlier brilliant endeavor failed. And I would encourage you to do so. Do just that, because it will prove my thesis that very often failure led to eventual success, either of the person or the project, and that the seeds of the successful phase were sown in the essential earlier experience of failure. But I have limited time to talk to you, and I believe there is one further essential message that I can pass on. And that is something every entrepreneur tends to learn from their own failure, which is when you are no longer the right person to run the business. Running a business is absolutely not the same thing as starting a business, and it can be totally destructive to the confidence of the flamboyant, charismatic, determined creator to find that he or she has become the biggest block to the future of the organization. It is every bit as painful an experience as the parent who suddenly finds that their adorable child has become a troubled teenager who is unconsciously preparing to leave the nest and create their own family structure. Suddenly, the day comes when you are cast aside, and the professional managers who decided not to be an entrepreneur all those years ago are the ones being paid big salaries with secure pensions. The experience can be devastating. With your support structure removed, your baby under the control of somebody else, possibly having lost money, disorientated because every minute of your time is now empty, whereas before it was totally filled with absolute application to the achievement of the dream, the objective, the selling of the idea, making it a success. So, looking back on a lifetime of endeavor, with its record of successes and far too many failures for comfort, was it all worth it? A foolish thought, of course, because you cannot have your life over again. Just as the monk or nun turned their back on a conventional life, so did I. And there is no point now saying, what if? Any objective audit of my position would probably come to the conclusion that I had failed. And in monetary terms, that is probably true. I would have been better off if I had remained in an oil company with a secure pension. But my goodness me, that is not really the point of life, is it? I can say with some confidence that almost everybody on earth will be touched at some time or other by something that I invented or developed. Patrick mentioned installing the first electronic pumps. Actually, I invented it. I created the very first one. You also heard about the credit card transaction. Well, you'll be using that too, and we did the first one of those. There's the share dealing systems and the early stage internet. I've had an enormously interesting life, meeting and working with fascinating people, with experiences that you could never have scripted in advance, that no other lifestyle could have offered. So there you have it. The expectation that you can have if you choose the life of an entrepreneur. Saying at the end that you probably failed, however much you actually achieved. I am unrepentant. I celebrate every day of that failure. I would do it all over again, just the same. If people judge me as having failed, then it is because I tried always to achieve something more. And that is the sort of personality we are. Never satisfied. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Colin, thank you very, very much. That was absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much, Colin. That was absolutely fascinating altogether. Really a super speech. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure there are going to be some from some members of the audience. Actually, we've got one. We've got a lovely young lady in a blue dress. Wants to speak to you.
Hello, Colin. Hello again.
Oh, my goodness, Peter.
At Young Markets, and I've heard that you had some ideas that didn't really work at the time, that actually failed, and then a couple of years later they turned out to be a successful story for somebody else.
That's
Idea,
correct.
or at least one idea that works now.
Well, Patrick knows that I've spent a lot of time trying to create small-scale stock exchanges for emerging communities, and that hasn't really worked, but it must work one day for them. I take comfort that the idea was right. Okay, maybe we didn't succeed with the execution, but all small countries must have their own exchange structure, because otherwise they become the client of another country. And well, Patrick will know all about that, and he'll be able to tell you locally how that goes.
Okay, thank you very much, Colin. Any other questions from the audience? No, Patrick?
I'm fascinated. Colin, I'd like to ask you something though. I mean, you've talked a lot about these sorts of failures and these sorts of things like that. Tell us about, you were talking about how you start doing one thing, realize that it may not be the right thing, and then you've carried on to actually manage to make a success out of something that started or in its initial phases was going in the wrong direction.
Well, maybe I can go back to the invention of the electronic petrol pump. I set up a company to manage forecourts, petrol stations for the oil industry, and it was entirely paper-based. And we ended up running too many of them, being buried in paper. And I knew from my army experience of anti-tank missiles about data. So I set out to make something that gave me an automatic data feed. And that became the electronic petrol pump. And we ended up a manufacturer of electronics and stopping running the management business. So it was complete change. And another example perhaps is when we started the first stockbroking, electronic stockbrokers. That was because we replaced the video switch with a digital switch in the city, which you can probably explain to the audience what that means, Patrick. But it was a question of linking front office to back office, and nobody did it. So we set out to do it. It was obvious. You know, here was an opportunity. We started the first electronic stockbrokers as a consequence. Life gives you opportunity. You move to take advantage of that opportunity. It may be a conversation in a pub or something you read in the paper. And but it only works if you're out there ready to try.
That's right. Any other questions from the audience? No questions. Thank you very much, Colin. And I hope to see you back in Toruń. Hopefully, we'll have a chance to speak to you and have a chat during our next Mission ToRun sometime next year, maybe. And thank you very much for your time, and it's been very inspiring. And we wish you a lovely evening. We're going to continue our attack here.
Thank you. I have June the 28th in my diary.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.